Tim Hardway, 0 for 17 from the field. We have to start with Tim Hardway. Because when you think of awful shooting nights, this is one of the first games that comes up. On December 27th, 1991, Hardway went 0 for 17 from the field against Minnesota. That is still the most field goal attempts in a game with 0 makes in NBA history. He finished with just 2 points in 44 minutes. And what makes it even crazier is that Hardway was not some random role player. That same 1991 to 92 season, he averaged 23.4 points and 10.0 assists. The Warriors won 55 games, and he even received MVP votes. That's why this game stands out. This was not a bad player having a bad player game. This was an all-star level guard, in the middle of a huge season, putting up one of the worst shooting nights the league has ever seen. That's what makes it memorable. It's the contrast. One night, he looked unstoppable all season. The next, literally nothing went in. Shaquille O'Neal, 0 for 11 from the free throw line. Next is Shaq. And honestly, you probably already expected him to be here. On December 8th, 2000, Shaquille O'Neal went 0 for 11 from the free throw line against Seattle. That is the most free throw attempts in a game with 0 makes in NBA history. Now, with Shaq, bad free throw shooting was never a surprise. But even for Shaq, going 0 for 11 is insane. And what makes it stand out even more is the season context. In 2000 to 2001, Shaq averaged 28.7 points and a 12.7 rebounds, led the league in win shares, and anchored a Lakers team that went on to win the title. So again, this is another case where the player's overall season was elite. But one specific stat in one specific game was historically ugly. That's why this one sticks. Shaq was dominating the league, and yet on one night, he gave you one of the worst foul line performances ever. Andre Drummond, 23 missed free throws. If Shaq had the most brutal all-miss free throw game, Andre Drummond probably had the most painful free throw game overall. On January 20th, 2016, Drummond missed 23 free throws against Houston. That is the most missed free throws by a player in a game in NBA history. He went 13 for 36 at the line. And the weird part is that his overall box score still looked decent. He had 17 points and 11 rebounds. But when you miss 23 free throws in one game, that becomes the story no matter what else happened. And Drummond's 2015 to 16 season was actually a really strong one. He led the NBA in rebounds at 14.8 per game and made all NBA. That's why this game stands out, because it shows how one stat can completely hijack the conversation. Drummond was one of the best rebounders in basketball that year, but this one game was such a disaster at the line that it became one of the most famous ugly stat lines ever. James Harden, 12 turnovers. Now let's go from missed shots to taking care of the ball. On November 23rd, 2016, James Harden committed 12 turnovers against Toronto. That tied one of the highest single-game turnover totals in NBA history. What makes it even crazier is that he also had 29 points and 15 assists in the same game. That is such a Harden stat line. Huge production, huge control of the offense, and then way too many mistakes. And in the 2016 to 17 season, Harden led the NBA in assists per game at 11.2 and also led the league in win shares. That's why this game belongs here, because it's not just a player being sloppy, it's one of the best offensive engines in basketball, pushing things so far that the mistakes became historic too. That game basically captures the risk of heliocentric offense in one box score. You get everything. The points, the assists, the usage, and sometimes the turnovers explode with it. Tony Snell, 28 minutes of basically nothing. Now we need a different kind of terrible stat line. Because sometimes the worst game is not about huge misses or huge turnovers. Sometimes it's about doing almost nothing at all. On February 24th, 2017, Tony Snell played 28 minutes against Utah and finished with 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, and 0 blocks. He went 0 for 2 from the field and 0 for 1 from 3. StatMuse identifies it as the most minutes played in a regular season game with that full 0 line. And what makes this one funny is that Snell was actually having a solid year for his role. In 2016 to 17, he started 80 games and shot 40.6% from 3. So this was not about him being useless all year. It was about one game where he was on the floor for a long time and left almost no statistical footprint. That's why people remember it. A player can be fine overall, but when you play 28 minutes and basically leave the box score blank, that becomes internet history forever. John Starks, Game 7 of the 1994 finals. This one might be the most painful of the entire video, because unlike some of the other games here, this wasn't in January. This wasn't on a random Tuesday night. This was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. On June 22nd, 1994, John Starks went 2 for 18 from the field and 0 for 11 from 3 against Houston. He finished with 8 points in 42 minutes. Basketball Reference notes that it set a record for the most three-point attempts without a make in a playoff game, and StatMuse lists that same 0 for 11 finals line. And that's why this one hits harder than almost any other bad stat line. Starks was not a scrub. In 1993 to 94, he averaged 16.6 points per game, and the Knicks made the finals. But one awful shooting night on the biggest stage possible changed how a lot of people remember him. That's why this performance still gets talked about. Because context matters. A bad regular season game is one thing. A horrible Game 7 in the finals is something else entirely. Cody Williams, minus 60. Now for a more modern kind of ugly stat. On January 10th, 2026, Cody Williams posted a minus 60 plus minus against Charlotte. StatMuse lists that as the lowest single game plus minus in NBA history. And plus minus can be noisy. Everybody knows that. One bad stretch, weird lineup combinations, blowout game script, all of that matters. But minus 60 is still ridiculous. What makes it stand out is that Williams was a real rotation player. This season he has averaged 7.3 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 1.5 assists in 56 games. So this wasn't some 1-minute garbage time record. This was a real player, in a real game, ending up on the wrong side of one of the ugliest plus-minus numbers the league has ever seen. That's why it belongs here. It's a reminder that even if a full stat line doesn't look horrifying, sometimes one number tells you exactly how bad the game felt. Ayo Dosunmu, 26 minutes, all zeros. The last one I want to mention is Ayo Dosunmu, because his game is like the Tony Snell game, but with a modern twist. StatMuse lists Dosunmu as one of the players with 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, and 0 blocks in more than 25 minutes, and in his case, it happened in 26 minutes against Milwaukee on December 11th, 2023. What makes that so weird is that Dosunmu was having a pretty productive 2023 to 24 season overall. He played 76 games, averaged 12.2 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.6 assists, and shot over 40% from 3. So just like with Hardway and Drummond and Starks, this is another reminder that one horrible stat line does not automatically mean the player had a horrible season. It just means one night went completely wrong, and that's really the whole theme of this video. If you made it this far, comment who had the worst stats on this list.